Marriage equality became the law of the land in the United States in June 2015, but for many Americans there is still the fear of being married on Friday and fired on Monday. Fired? For being gay? Yes, because in 34 states in the U.S., you can legally be fired based on your sexual orientation or gender identity. Marriage equality was a big win for civil rights for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. But equality doesn't stop at marriage. Many Americans are still unequal in employment, housing, and adoption. So how did we get here? What is the history of marriage equality? What are the hurdles with employment, housing, and adoption? And where do we go from here? Marriage equality was once thought of as a state's issue. It was thought of as something that could be passed state by state, and for a while it was. And then in June 2015, the Supreme Court ruled by a decision of 5-4 that it was a constitutional right for same-sex couples to marry. That decision meant that any couple in the United States, regardless of whether they were opposite sex or same sex, could legally get married. And that was a cause of joy and celebration for many Americans, both LGBT and straight. They saw it as a huge victory that it was. But it was also opened a pathway to many other hurdles. There were some couples who were feeling even more discrimination and more fear, because even though they could get married on Friday, in 34 states, they could still get fired on Monday simply for being gay. America has come a long way in terms of civil rights for LGBT people, but with this progress, there are still many places that they are not equal. In employment, you can be fired in 29 states based on your sexual orientation. And that does not mean that just simply because you are gay or lesbian, but that you are perceived to be gay or lesbian. You can be fired in 29 states legally. In 34 states, you can be fired based on your gender identity or gender expression. Yes, this does mean the transgendered community, but it also means that if a woman, in the policy, it says that she needs to wear a blouse and she decides she wants to wear a men's business shirt, she can be fired because that's considered gender expression, and her gender expression is not matching the HR policies of her employer. And so for that reason, she can be fired in 34 states based on that gender expression. But it's 2015, right? This doesn't still happen. Yes, in 2015, this does still happen. There are 43% of gay and 90% of transgender Americans who've experienced discrimination and harassment on the job via the Center for American Progress. And 56% of gay individuals and 70% of transgender individuals have experienced some form of discrimination in housing, also via the Center for American Progress. Discrimination is a very real thing for LGBT Americans. It's something that they face on a daily basis, despite the ability and the right to get married across this great nation. There is also discrimination when it comes to our children. When it comes to finding a home for all of those children across the U.S., there is discrimination in adoption and foster care. I know this from personal experience. I am adopting through foster care in Arizona, where there are 19,000 kids in need of a home here in Arizona. And throughout the process, I had to change my paperwork 4 times, from married to single to married to single. Not because I went through a divorce, not because my status changed, but because the definition under Arizona law changed 4 times, even though marriage was legal in the United States. Arizona was unsure if that meant that it was legal in terms of adoption. And so we did have to change that 4 times. And there are 19,000 kids who need a home, who need a loving, stable home. And so even though we can get married here in Arizona, here in America, we are not seen as equal. We are not treated as equal. And those that are suffering are the children. So while marriage was a win for civil rights, equality doesn't stop at marriage. and you can make a difference. And how can you make a difference? You can make a difference by being an ally. An ally is someone who supports the LGBT community. An ally is ready to learn more about LGBT issues, to become educated, to listen to people's personal stories, and to really make a difference. An ally stands up and speaks up when confronted about LGBT issues. So if they hear someone make a derogatory term or they say something that's just not okay, they stand up and say, that's not okay. Let me teach you about something that I've learned about. They participate in one or more LGBT organizations within the community, whether that's with foster care youth or a political organization. They're looking for ways to get involved in the politics of equality, personally, socially, and politically. Here in the United States, according to PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, 1 in 4 families have an immediate family member who identifies as LGBT. This is something that affects all of us, not just LGBT Americans, but all Americans, and we need all Americans to take a stand, because it wasn't until men stood up that women received the right to vote. It wasn't until whites stood up that blacks received the right to vote and ended slavery. And we need straight Americans to take a stand and stand up so that all Americans are treated equally, including our lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered family members, siblings, friends, and strangers, so that everyone is treated equally, not just in marriage, but also in employment, housing, and adoption.